Hi, so I'm just going to be doing a quick video on how to generate a fixtures list in Python. It was helped by this video, which is written in C, and had a minor problem with its sorting algorithm, which I fixed in Python, in my Python version of it. So yeah, this is a pretty simple program like the one used here as well in C, or rather C#, and it looks quite complicated. Like if you haven't really programmed much, and I don't know, like it could just, I could see how this could like look complicated, but it's really very simple. And it's easier if you just kind of start here. Start with the fixtures list generator. So you can kind of ignore most of these properties here and just look at the call function. Now, if you don't know what a call function is in Python, it's basically like, you know, if you have a function and you call it, say like g is a function, you call it like that. Well, here I have f equal to fixture, which is actually a class, and like with functions, you can call a class by doing this, and that calls the call method. So this line would be the same as saying call like that. So I tend to use those if I've got a class that's kind of acting like a function that has one main purpose. Which in this case is just to generate the fixtures list, of course. So we start off with a empty list, and we say while the list, so like while our number of results is less than the desired number of results. So we're saying here fixtures list plus equals get round of fixtures. So you know how like in a league there's like rounds of fixtures, so everybody plays each other and then everybody plays each other again. Each of those would constitute a round. So I'm just getting a round of fixtures every time. So say if there's 30 teams in a league, so there would be 15 matches per round. We're adding 15 matches every time here. And then we are rearranging the items. And this is probably the most interesting part of the algorithm. To rearrange the items, what I did was, it's kind of an interesting thing, is first I copied the list, and with this you want to make sure that you don't just do this, because then Python will think that you want to modify the actual self.items, and you don't want to do that. Because you're creating the copy as kind of a reference, because you want to essentially move the list. You want to move the items like over each time so that they get a different opponent each time, and it's not really very easy to do if you're working with a single copy, so the extra copy makes the algorithm easier. So you're saying for item in range 1 and the length of the items, and by the way, notice we're skipping 0 here because we leave the first. I don't know exactly why that is, but it's just recommended that you leave the first item where it is in the list. So we ignore the 0th element. So we start from 1, and we say if if I is equal to 1, then self.items I equals copy minus 1. So we're basically saying the last item in the list becomes the first item in the list, and by first I mean second, because obviously the first item would be the 0th index. And then else, if the index is not 1, then we say self.items I equals copy I minus 1. Now if you think about this, for example, if the index is 2, we would be getting copy 2 minus 1, which would be 1. So that would be the same as saying like index 2 would become index 1, or rather index 2 would then be equal to whatever was previously in index 1. So in other words, what we're doing is we're moving the item to the right. So essentially, if you have a list of like items like A, B, C, D, E, F, like A is at the 0th element, that always stays the same. But after each round, what we do is we take F and we move it here. And so every other item is pushed to the right. So if you think about it in terms of this algorithm, this part here is to move the F to the first index, like this, and then to determine the indexes of the remaining elements, these ones here, we use this line. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a little bit confusing, but that's really the only confusing part of this. If you just spend a little time looking at it. Okay, and I've got some kind of error. That's because I did that there. Okay. So yeah, so to return to the where are we here? The call function. As you can see, it's quite simple really, because this is the main bit of code that you need to be concerned with. So like I said, we've added the round of fixtures, and then we've rearranged the items, and we repeat this process until we have enough fixtures. And then this is just to check that we've got the right number of fixtures. If for any reason we didn't, that would raise an error. And then we set the fixtures list. So it's very simple. And the get round of fixtures, I didn't actually cover this. The get round of fixtures function, which is also quite important here. So we start off with an empty list. As you would say, there's 30 teams in the league and there's 15 matches. We start off with an empty list, and our aim at the end of it is to get those 15 matches into this list. So we start off with I equals 0, and we say while I is less than self.matches per round, which is a property. So I've just calculated this ahead of time just so it's a little bit easier to read. So we can just say while I is less than self.matches per round, as opposed to calculating it in line, which would maybe be a little bit confusing. So while I is less than self.matches per round, we want to create a fixture, and then we want to append that fixture to the list, and then we return the round of fixtures in the end. So it's really kind of similar to the while loop we got going on here, except here we're concerned with the matches per round, and here we're concerned with the number of rounds. And the fixtures class is just simply, it's a very, very simple class, about as simple as you can possibly get, and it's just takes a home and away, which is the team. It checks the type's correct, and then it has a string function which just says home versus away. Now you could get more kind of complex with this, and depending on your use case, maybe you want to print this to a file or whatever, but I didn't do that because this is just kind of a general use case. Okay, so then we return to the main function. This will hopefully make more sense now. Oh, and I'm using, I did actually set this up to work with files, so I have an example here, which is just like a bunch of sports. I don't know, I just couldn't think of a better example, so say if you were ranking these sports in terms of how much you like them or something, you could do that. So yeah, so we run the main function. What this does is, let's see here, parser equals argument parser, and so if I run this file here, let's do main.py example.txt. Oh, py main.py example.txt. My bad. So then it generates this according to the file. So if I left this left this blank, then it would say, hey, you know, you haven't entered a file here. So the way you're using this program at the moment, the way I've set it up, is basically you have your teams in a text file, and in main it just comes through and it says, okay, this is the file name, and it sets the file name here, and then it checks whether the text was added. So for example, let's do this, oops, do this again, and if I just had example on its own, then it would also work. But you know, in case you add .text because you're just being nice and you're adding the extension for the program, then the program doesn't break as a result, so that's just to make sure it doesn't do that. Then teams equals get teams, which is this function here, get teams from file, which just literally goes through and does l.strip, the l in .readlines. Anybody who's worked with readlines before will know why this is done. It's because it counts the new line, which is really annoying, so you have to go through it and strip each line. So it's just basically, this is just a list of every team example. So it would just be a list of soccer, rugby, tennis, so on and so forth. And we have a file not found error if that's the case, and then we return the teams. Okay, so that's our teams now done, and we shuffle the teams as well, just for good measure. Shuffle a list around. That's just so you wouldn't have the first match of the season or whatever wouldn't always have the same team involved. So like the team at the 0th index would always be playing on the first match. You know, that would. So if you didn't want that, you know, that's why I've added the shuffle teams thing there. But it's not really that important. You can get rid of that if you wanted to. And then I've got fixgen, which just stands for fix generator, equals fixtures generator teams, and then we call the function as I mentioned earlier. We're just calling this function here. Oops. And then finally we print the fixtures list, which if you're interested is just here. We've just created another copy of the list. We said round num equals 1, so it just makes it easier. I've split them by rounds, and you'll see that if we run the function again, what I showed you earlier. So it's just basically like a prettier way of printing it so that it's more clear what's going on. Otherwise it would just be this immediately followed by this, and you'd have no idea what was going on. So I've just added a little splitter there just to make it more readable. And yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole shebang. So hopefully that helped somebody. Apologies for my terrible way of explaining stuff. This is my first attempt at doing so. It's probably really bad, so